Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Talking Tradesman. Today, all the way from North Wales, I have Aled from How's Dad? Do the Welsh bit for me, mate.
Sit my dad.
There we go. So, Aled, let's talk, mate.
Yeah.
First of all, mate, thank you very much for giving up your time travelling over. It is kind of over and down,
Yeah.
to come for a talk.
Yeah.
And big shout out to Mark Williams, who has introduced Aled or made Aled aware of the podcast.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, without him, then I wouldn't be in this position now, and I definitely wouldn't be running How's Dad, Sit my dad.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
so Aled is kind of in the same sort of space, I guess, as Mark.
Yeah. I'm trying to focus more on running dad groups, where I take dads out and give them a space where they can feel like they can talk openly about their mental health issues, but also creating a bond between dad and child as well, which I think is, for me especially, I think something that's really important that isn't done enough. There's not enough spaces for dads to have that space with the kids.
It's mega important, mate.
Yeah.
And I think the work that you're doing, I've followed your socials and seen what you're doing and trying to do, and also what Mark's doing is incredibly valuable, mate. Because as we were talking pre-record, fathers' sort of value and mental health just isn't really addressed. So to pick up the reins and do what you're doing and sort of almost take responsibility for that, it's
Yeah.
a very noble thing to do, mate.
Thank you, I guess. But I don't see it that way. I see it as I had my own mental health breakdown, and there was nobody really there to support me. So me doing this isn't about all this trying to get thanks or anything like that. It's just trying to prevent one other father from taking their own life and leaving their family like I almost did.
You say that though, mate, but I find it is important to give those thanks because
Yeah.
it isn't, regardless of the fact that most blokes don't like compliments, but regardless of, not doing it, I know you're not doing it for that,
Yeah.
but regardless of that, there are thanks to be given for the fact that there are people like you
Yeah.
and people like Mark that are stepping into that space, that hole that you've identified through your own lived experience.
Yeah.
And it is really important. So I think it's worthwhile saying, it's noble what you're doing, and to thank you on behalf of the people that you're helping for stepping into that space, mate, because it's more people like you, like, put myself in the category, like with the podcast, that are standing up, realising that there's an issue and thinking, what can I do to try and
Yeah.
address it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, I guess you're right. There is need to acknowledge all these people who do fantastic work. Like I said, yourself and Mark, just to name a couple, who are trying to. The way I see it is trying to change the world that we live in the way of realizing that actually dads are just as important at home as mums, and without dad giving that, I don't know. I don't, I'm trying to. It's it's difficult because stereotypically you see mum at home, and mum's a caregiver, and you just see dad and he's just playing around with the kids. What people don't realise is that is just as important in the development of a child as it is for mum to come over and give that child a hug and to give her a kiss and just say, it's okay.
Yeah.
Both roles are as important as each other.
100%, mate. I was just thinking while you were talking then, I was thinking that the strangeness, we'll get into a little bit more about you, about how you've come to the position that you're in, and find out about what you're doing.
Yeah.
But as an overarching thing, it's quite interesting actually that although I guess publicly the value does seem to be much more heavily weighted towards a mother's importance,
Yeah.
when you talk about people that haven't got a strong or prominent or present like father in their life,
Yeah.
it's quite often referred to in a negative context, like, oh, that person has gone off the rails because they're lacking a father figure,
Yeah.
or they're lacking a strong male influence in their life.
Yeah.
But it's not really ever talked about in the positive, in terms of
Yeah. It's always
how
negative.
important it is that there's a a strong male figure, and the credit given there.
Yeah.
People often talk, as I say, in the negative about the situation, but there's no emphasis on the positive importance. That makes sense.
Yeah, it does. But I try not to listen too much to that. I think there are people who make the comment of, that kid is struggling because there was no male presence in their life, but it never seems to have the same the other way around. If a dad is solo parenting, you never hear the negative of, that child is too much of a bruiser, therefore mum must not have been around to be a caregiver. So I try not to listen to that too much. There are people who still believe that dad is just there to take the kids, and I've had it myself where I've heard people say, "Oh, it's nice to see you taking your kids out babysit them." I don't babysit my own children. They are my children. I am as responsible for my children as my wife is.
Yeah.
So yeah, those kind of comments I kind of ignore, and it's more the people who make them kind of comments I judge rather than the children themselves. I think the children's behaviour is down to their parents parenting them rather than having that role model, because I think mum and dad can equally fill each other's boots if they parent correctly.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Equally important. And as you say, that there's quite a lot of single parent situations on both sides of the spectrum, isn't there?
Yeah. Yeah.
But so I guess to find out a little bit about you, Aled,
Yeah.
we'll talk about sort of where you started and all the rest of it. So North Wales,
Yeah.
Bangor.
Originally from Anglesey,
Okay,
a little village called Llangoed.
I'm glad you said that.
Yeah, it's a little village on Anglesey, and I lived there for 18, 19 years.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, I started off as a plumber, went to college, did my plumbing apprenticeship, and hated it. Hated every second of it. I couldn't wait to get out of it. It was one of them jobs like
And to
I
pull
left
it
school.
to pull it back a
Yeah,
little, what made you go into it? Like, why plumbing?
it was. It's quite funny, really, because at the time there was an article in the paper about how plumbers were earning £75,000 a year.
Oh,
And
okay.
I thought, fantastic, this is exactly what I want to do. I can go out and, 16 years old when you just leave school, it's like £75,000 a year. Yeah, I'll do that, and go out and buy nice cars and houses. And realistically, it's just, unless you're running your own company, it's not going to happen. So yeah, that was the main reason I got into it.
Money.
Yeah, money.
But it's a valid reason.
Yeah.
It's a valid reason. I think there's quite a few people that get into the trades for that reason. So yeah, fair play.
Yeah. So did it for 4 years when I did my apprenticeship, and then it was just like, I need to get out of this. And just so happened there was a company who was building a fish farm in Penmon on Anglesey, and so I thought, I'll give it a go. I've got nothing else to do, nothing better to go and try. So I went and did that, and through that I became a fabricator welder, and I'm an aquacultural engineer. So I build life support systems
So
for.
just to repeat, that's an aquacultural engineer
Yeah,
rather
sure.
than an agricultural.
Yeah.
Aquacultural, as in aquatic.
Aquatic, yes. So I build the life support systems for fish farms, aquariums, and that kind of thing. Everything that you don't see, everything that keeps fish alive, basically.
Yeah, it's fascinating. We had this conversation pre-record, but I'll repeat it again for the benefit of the listeners that weren't here at that time. One of my good customers had a koi carp pond built that they wanted to be able to get in with the fish
Yeah.
and I don't know whether I'd say swim or whether it was more of a cold plunge type situation.
Yeah.
But obviously, us humans carry, I guess, bodily oils and things
Yeah.
like that,
Yeah. That's true.
which I would have assumed would naturally have probably killed the fish or certainly been detrimental. But they had a big fancy filtration
Yeah.
system fitted
Yeah.
that meant, and this pond had like a waterfall that went into it, and there were steps and you could sit.
Yeah.
I mean, to me personally, the thought of sitting with fish doesn't tick any boxes. But I guess the whole Buddhist meditation type vibe,
Yeah.
that was where they were going with it. So that is the kind of thing that you would design and
Yeah.
install.
Yeah, I mean, we've had similar situations where one of our clients were allergic to chlorine in the swimming pool.
Hmm.
So we had to design a pool that would run with seawater.
Okay.
Yeah, an infinity pool. So yeah, I don't know if you've seen it before. Where
Yeah,
they've
yeah,
bought,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So it's quite interesting. It's and I've travelled all over the world doing it. It's yeah, it gets you around a bit.
I mean, again, we were talking about this off camera as such, but what tell me about some of the or tell the listeners about some of the work that you've done in that field and the places it's taken you.
Yeah. So the company I work for have worked in the Burj, building an aquarium in the building.
Mm.
They have worked at Ski Dubai. I don't know if anybody's been there, but the penguins at the bottom. Yeah, the company I work for
Really?
helped design that. I've worked in Saudi Arabia on university buildings. I worked on, well, the company I work for built a lagoon in one of the palaces out in Saudi Arabia,
Mm.
Portugal, Norway. Yeah, it's there was one instance where an aquarium was built on a yacht. So
I mean, you
it's
kind of think actually an aquarium on a yacht is kind of like
yeah,
inside outside kind of
yeah, a
situation,
little
isn't
bit,
it?
yeah,
But I guess by the sounds of it, mate, it's one of those for people that money is not an obstacle that can come up with their wildest desires and
yeah,
dreams of like, I want a huge aquarium in a skyscraper. Then your
yeah,
company are the company that turn around and go, okay, let's make that work.
yeah, yeah. It's crazy to think that somebody's got that much money that they want an aquarium in their yacht, or somebody who wants a
Yeah,
lagoon in the back garden.
yeah,
You
that's
know, with
yeah.
some of the fish that were in there. I mean, there was rumours that there was a great white in there at some point. I'm not 100% sure on the truth of that, but it was rumoured that was a
Do you know, I would like to think it would be a rumor. However, when you look at some of the people in the world, I
yeah,
would maybe lean towards the fact that somebody would try that
yeah, definitely,
because I
yeah,
think there's an amount of money where they just go, I want it.
yeah,
Like, I don't care what it costs, I want it.
yeah, exactly, yeah, it's
However, again, like one of those, I love this podcast because I learn things every week. However, a great white shark apparently can't be kept in captivity because.
So my understanding of it is with the rebar that goes into the concrete, as the great whites give off their sonar or their
Hmm.
as it comes back, it sends them crazy, which eventually will kill them. Is
See,
my
there you
understanding
go.
of it.
Now you know. Now you know why
Yeah.
nobody has got a pet great white shark. I mean, not assuming you're a fish expert, Alec,
No,
but is that unique to great whites? Because people do have sharks.
I believe so. I think that is the main reason why nobody's got a great white in captivity.
Yeah,
I think it has been tried a few times. I know of a couple of companies, which I'm not allowed to mention, who have tried, and within 6 weeks they've all died.
really.
Yeah,
Died of what? Like died
they've
of
just gone crazy.
going crazy,
Yeah,
and then it's
yeah,
interesting, isn't it? Because I mean, obviously, talking about mental health, and I know mental health of a great white shark is, I mean, that's a stretch.
yeah,
However, it kind of makes you think about the power of the mind.
yeah,
If it is a mental situation with the shark that then eventually kills it,
yeah,
it's quite thought provoking. the sort of implications of that.
Yeah, I mean, you could sit there for hours, couldn't you? And yeah,
Mm,
there's a few rabbit holes you can go down there and
yeah.
overthink it, I guess.
So that job has taken you all over the
It
world,
has, yeah.
installing bespoke unit.
Yeah.
So do you get sort of like given a problem where they turn around and say, "This is what that person wants. How do we make it work?"
The way it actually, the way you work out is backwards. So we'll get a client and say, right, I want to build a fish farm in a desert somewhere. And what the way we work it out is we work out the effluent, so the waste that comes from the fish, so the poo and everything like that.
Mm.
And that's the starting point, and then you work your way back from that.
So you
To then,
start at fish shit,
yeah,
and then you go backwards.
yeah, and then work out to what size system you need
Ah, okay.
to be able to cope with that much shit,
Yeah,
and provide them with enough protein and bacteria to so they can thrive.
that's quite scientific, really.
Oh yeah, it's way above my pay grade.
Yeah, mate, it's unique. You're definitely the first guest that I've spoken to that does that for a living.
Yeah,
I've never had any guests come on and talk about great white sharks, so there's another
or
first
fish
for
shit.
you, mate. Yeah, no, but it is interesting though. I mean, I would imagine. I mean, again, to repeat a conversation we had off camera, it's very much a job for you, but
Yeah,
it's a very unique one.
yeah. It's like I said, it's a job,
Mm,
and I used to be really passionate about it. And don't get me wrong, I do get a lot of job satisfaction, as in when I've built something and you can step back
do you
and
get
you
to once
appreciate
it's
it.
finished? Do you get to see it, or is it?
The way we work is we build all the equipment in our workshop on Anglesey,
Mm,
and then we ship it over to the side of the world or wherever it's going, and we'll install it there.
yeah.
Um, but then once the install is done, we leave, and the commissioning engineer comes along and he does all his balancing
Okay.
of the system. So we never get to see it.
There's no like service contract where you go
No.
out every so many months and check on the great
Um,
whites.
the director would go out and do that side of
I
it.
bet he would.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
don't normally.
absolutely.
Yeah, we don't do that side of it.
Yeah.
The only time we really see it up and running is if we have to go back and do add-ons, or if there's an issue with the system.
What's the biggest tank you've worked on that wasn't a fish farm? So like a tank in a building or a yacht or whatever.
Uh, it's hard to say that because again, I don't really get to see the tanks,
Mm,
because what you guys see as the public isn't what we see, because
right.
it's the themers who come in and they'll theme the room, and the structural engineers will build the room, and they'll stick a pipe through the floor, whereas we're in underneath everything in a dark and dingy little plant room and a million miles away
Okay.
from the
Okay.
family, building everything underground.
Yeah.
I guess the biggest job I've done, I'm not 100% sure on capacity, but it was at the time the largest cylindrical tank in the world, which is in Jeddah Airport.
Okay.
Yeah. And I believe it was 40 meters deep.
Jesus. 40.
Yeah. And we were
That's
underneath it.
huge.
Yeah.
I mean, the weight of that water must be phenomenal.
And we were in the plant room underneath.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Christ.
So, yeah.
I mean, I've got to say, mate, when like I'm here listening to you talk about these, like the tanks and the places that you've been,
Yeah.
and all that is going through my head is Bond baddie. That's all I'm thinking. I'm just thinking like Doctor No with a metal hand and tiger sharks kind of
Yeah.
thing going on.
Yeah.
So, which again, I guess I imagine the bigger the fish, the bigger the waste, the more extreme the filtration's got to be.
Yeah. I think the biggest species that we have issues with are actually sea lions.
Really?
Yeah. They're just big dogs.
I guess they kind of are. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. The waste that comes off them is, you wouldn't believe it, and it
Yeah.
stinks. And people don't see it on big scale, like in the zoo. Chester Zoo, for instance, have a couple of sea lions and a couple of zoos around the country. But every few months, those sand filters will get changed, and there's a few tons of sand in them filters that nobody sees that get emptied. And the way these sand filters work is they collect all the feces,
Yeah.
and so all that needs taking out, get rid of, and put a new sand in.
Do you know what,
So
mate?
that's
This
what's
is
that's a person's job.
this is dead interesting because it's a subject I have genuinely never spoken about in my life.
Yeah,
So I've never considered it and I've never spoken about it before. But yeah, now
yeah,
you're saying it, it's
yeah,
like,
yeah,
of course they would need filtration.
yeah,
Of course they would need stuff doing like that. But it's
yeah.
just, yeah, you go to the zoo, you go to an aquarium, you don't think about the waste. You
No,
just think, oh, look at that pretty fish.
yeah,
You know, well, isn't it clear? But yeah, I guess obviously there's waste.
yeah,
I've never really thought about that. I've never thought about fish waste, as
yeah.
it were.
Nobody really does. I mean, the general public, they go to aquarium and they see the nice, pretty fish.
Yeah.
Whereas when I go to aquarium, I'm not even bothering looking at the fish. You look at the clarity of the water.
Yeah.
It's sort of it's weird, like a plumber when you walk into a bathroom and you look at the pipes and then go, why have they done it like that? Or I
Yeah.
guess there's a bit of decorating.
As a decorator, mate, it's a curse.
Yeah.
Every building, every hotel room you walk into, you're looking at the cutting in.
Yeah,
You're looking at the wallpaper. Oh, well, that pattern's a bit out.
yeah,
Yeah, it's a curse that you can never shake. And I guess you're the same now
Yeah.
with anything to do with aquariums.
yeah, definitely.
Well, that's dead interesting, mate. I appreciate the knowledge.
Right.
You've sort of filled me in there. But we'll move into obviously the how's you dad. I've got that right.
How's
haven't I?
Dad?
How's dad?
Yeah.
Sorry. The how's dad movement that you've started, which focuses on mental health for dads and
Yeah.
parents, has got its origins in your own journey,
Yeah, it has, yeah.
your own story and
Yes.
lived experience. So let's talk about that and how this whole, because I mean, it's pretty different to go from what you do for a living to moving into the mental health space.
Yeah.
And let's talk about the sort of like trigger point for that, if we can.
Yeah.
And how that all came about. So where did that first start? Where was the beginning of that journey for you?
I guess for many, many years, there's been something I felt like something's not quite right here. Something's a bit off. I've not felt myself, but I've put that down to, as a lot of us do, shut up, suck it up, get on with it, go out, go have a pint, forget about it, and that's what I've always done. Not really spoken about my feelings or my emotions, as a lot of us guys don't. And that's the way I've sort of lived, knowing that there's something there, but it's just me being dramatic.
When do you think, again, to sort of touch on that,
Yeah.
when do you think the first time you became, because that what you're talking about is like self-awareness, that I
Yeah.
don't think something's right.
Yeah.
A lot of people, there isn't something right, but they're not aware of it, so they kind of just live in that cycle.
Yeah.
When do you think you first noticed or had that self-reflection of, I don't think there's quite something right?
I guess it's always been there. It's always been I've never known that I've got mental health issues, but I've always known that something's not quite right with me. I never knew what that was. I thought I was just sensitive. I thought I was just, one of these guys who maybe a bit more in tune with their emotions, and which I kept getting angry about. I kept sort of beating myself up about. I'm a guy. I shouldn't be feeling this way. I shouldn't be this emotional. I should be the one that's, the roughy tufty rugby player who goes out and has a scrap on a field and goes out and drinks 10 pints on the bus on the way home and ends up being naked and on the high street.
The stereotypical sort of expectations of,
Yeah.
and I've got to say this, mate. There is a bit of a theme when it comes to my guests that have come over from Wales. That does seem to be quite a prevalent cultural thing with blokes from Wales is the expectation to be like rugby is like your national sport.
Yeah, it's almost a religion in Wales. Yeah,
But yeah, exactly. That's a very apt description of it,
yeah,
and it does seem to be that expectation carries quite a lot of weight. I mean, you've mentioned it. Andrew Jenkins, previous guest, has also mentioned it. Dan from Boldylocks, he also mentioned that sort of culture.
yeah.
So it does seem to be prevalent, and not to knock it because I'll offend every Welshman in the world, but for some people it obviously becomes a pressure,
Yeah,
and that then becomes an issue.
it is, but it's. I think it's something that's sort of ingrained in you. Is
Mm,
to I think you see a sport like rugby, and you automatically think, right, I've got to be strong, I've got to be tough, I've got to be this big bruiser. And I
mm,
think it's the same way as a couple of other sports, maybe like boxing, kickboxing,
yeah.
MMA. You you almost can't show your weakness. You've got to be that strong mountain of a man.
Mm.
And yeah, and it's definitely, I don't know whether it's just because it's our national sport that we all sort of have that ingrained into us almost in the womb that, you're going to play rugby and you're going to be
Mm.
this big roughy tufty rugby player and you're not going to cry, you're not going to show emotion. It's actual bullshit.
Yeah.
It,
It's a strange, to be honest, Alan, isn't it strange how we feel like physical strength has to be combined with mental strength, but it's not really strength, it's like mental ignorance.
yeah,
It's masking and suppression of emotions.
yeah,
It's a weird, like, I get it.
yeah,
Because again, I was raised around it myself. I used to play rugby, I used to play football, and
yeah,
similar sort of thing. And there is that, like, the whole be a man seems to like have this image around it of suppression of emotions,
yeah,
which combines with physical strength.
yeah,
Weird, isn't it? Really?
yeah. You've always, I don't think I've ever had it said so directly, but you're almost made to feel like you're less of a man
Mm,
if you cry or if you show emotion,
yeah,
rather than this strong man who's supposed to put his arm around his family and nothing can get in.
yeah.
Whereas actual fact, it's I now believe you're more of a man if you are able to show that emotion and give your family that emotional stability as well, rather than just I'm going to protect the family from all fear and threat.
I completely agree, mate.
Yeah,
I completely agree with you. And there shouldn't be that sort of combination, should there really? You can be a physical specimen or athletic specimen
yeah,
of a male, yet still be extremely in touch with your emotions, and it be okay to cry.
yeah,
Like, crying as a man does not have any significance to your physical strength or your
yeah,
ability to perform a sport or your ability to fight.
yeah.
It doesn't have any link, yet
No,
intrinsically as a culture we do.
yeah,
We link it all.
yeah,
It's strange when you start to break it down. It's then when you stand back and you go, why is that?
yeah. I know, and
Uh,
it's so ridiculous.
mm,
When somebody points it out to you, it's such so in your face. Like, how was I so naive to think that me
mm,
being so out of touch with my emotions was a benefit to my family?
yeah,
At what point did I think that that was going to help my family or my children and my wife's growth within the
mm.
family? It's so backwards, yet we all do it.
I think we worry, or the perceptions there, isn't it, that by talking about your emotions and feelings and becoming vulnerable, that you're then putting a weight on or a pressure on your family or partner,
Yeah,
because there is, and there's a part of us biologically that as a man we feel that we have to protect and provide,
yeah,
um, and I'm not against that, to be honest. I
yeah,
think that gives us purpose,
yeah,
and I think that's hugely important. But again, you can be vulnerable yet still be a protector.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know, one doesn't have to come without the other. It's
yeah,
You can
exactly.
combine all these
Yeah,
factors, and as you know, because obviously you're aware of this now, but you can be a vulnerable male
Yeah,
and still be of huge value and protect you and provide for your family.
definitely. And I think I've sort of proven that to myself with my mental health breakdown.
Mm,
Because before my episode, my whatever you want to call it, whatever, the people I speak to, everybody calls it something different, and
mm,
everybody sugarcoats it into, we won't say the word because don't want to trigger you, don't want to make you feel any
mm.
worse.
What do you refer to it as?
When I talk to people about what happened, I label it as it is, my suicide attempt.
Okay.
And that's because that's what it is. Me sugarcoating it, I'm using my episode or
Yeah.
my silly moment, doesn't do it justice. It
Mm,
doesn't give it that weight that it deserves. Because this was a huge moment in my life.
mm,
I'd I had a child. I've got two children with my wife, two from a previous relationship. But my youngest had been born 6 weeks prior.
mm.
And because of this, I'm feeling these feelings I've never had before. I felt like I wasn't enough. I felt like I wasn't supporting my family because I was so emotional. I thought, I'll go and I'll go down and try and hang myself. Was where my mind went to that morning, and me sugarcoating that. I think it doesn't do me service,
Mm.
as in it doesn't help me in any way, because then I'm lying to myself about how life defying it was. And people who I speak to and people who follow me, it doesn't help them either, because
Mm.
they're going through things that are very, very similar. And they don't want to hear how I had my silly moment, or I had an episode, I was feeling a little bit down.
Like it was just an off day or an off
Yeah,
thought. Yeah.
I went to try and take my own life.
Mm.
And I think we need to address it as what it is. That's what happened. I
Yeah.
went off and I tried to take my own life.
I appreciate you talking about it like that, mate. And I mentioned this before, but I think it's really important and valuable
Yeah,
because the more that we do try and it is an uncomfortable subject.
yeah,
People don't like talking about suicide and suicidal thoughts and feelings and ideations. But it creates a stigma around it where people don't talk about it. It gets swept under the rug. It
yeah.
doesn't get spoken about enough. But it is the biggest killer of men under 50.
It is. Yeah,
And it affects. I mean, I know the statistics for the building trades, but overall, 75% of all people that take their own lives are men.
yeah,
So it's a huge issue.
yeah.
It really is. And sweeping it under the carpet and referring as,
An
an
episode.
episode, it
Yeah,
doesn't do it justice.
yeah,
And it actually masks the severity of the situation.
definitely.
I want to talk to you about it, but I want to sort of pull it back a little bit to, I guess, the build up
Yeah,
and how it progressed to that severity of a
yeah,
situation. Um, so you've mentioned that you've always felt like something was a bit off
yeah.
when it comes to your mental health. How did it build to that point? Like, was there a trigger? Was there a key point? Or
Um, again, I'm happy to talk about it, but whenever I do talk about it, I judge myself because for saying it, but then I always try and explain why I've said what I've said.
mm,
So the key point for me was when my wife found out that she was pregnant with my first child.
yeah,
We'd been trying for a number of years and found out she was pregnant. I couldn't have been happier. Everything was fantastic. But I started getting nightmares, really, real bad night terrors where it was all to do with self-sacrifice.
mm,
And it was every single night from the moment she told me she was pregnant. After about 6 months after my eldest with her was
mm,
born, and I thought it's just a bit weird. It's the kind of thing you just get used to, but I didn't take too much notice of it. And then 3 years later, with no issues in the meantime, just mood that we went up and down, which I thought was absolutely normal. 3 years later, she said again, I'm pregnant. And it was like a flick of a switch. Again, that very night,
Really?
the nightmares came back. But this time, it felt worse. This time, it felt like. And I don't know whether it was because my first was a son and my second was a daughter, whether that had anything to do with it.
When you say self-sacrifice,
Yeah.
what sort of thing, just to
The
clarify?
nightmares I would have would be in my nightmares, somebody was breaking into the house. I would go downstairs, tackle them. I would get them out of the house, but I would be fatally wounded in the
Okay.
process.
Right,
And
yeah.
I would come back upstairs and tell my wife that it's safe, and she would,
Mm.
and then I would die in the dream. And it was every night, always the same topic. It was always me dying at the end, protecting my family. I've spoken to many counsellors about this, and we
We can
still
all
can't.
speculate. We
Yeah,
can all speculate. I mean, go all Freudian on it and
yeah,
start examining your dreams. But I mean, to me, it would be, my amateur speculation would be it's that responsibility of the protector role, isn't it?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah. Not feeling like you're enough to sort of support your family. Therefore, you have to make this grand sacrifice to feel like you are enough for your family.
yeah.
So yeah, once I found out that my wife was pregnant with my second child, they came on again, and they were worse for some reason, and just the content of the dream was more vivid. Whereas before they were patchy, but the end goal was the same. Whereas this was very detailed. I would wake up in the morning in a cold sweat, and it would affect me for a few days.
Did you talk to anyone about it at the time?
No,
No.
no, I just thought it's one of them things. I've had it before. It'll pass, and because I did used to have nightmares when I was a kid.
Okay.
Not the same content, but I used to have quite bad night terrors as well. And the closer it was getting to the birth, the more I felt like I'm not ready. I'm not going to be enough. I'm not going to be able to support my wife the way that she needs me to. I'm not going to be a good dad. And all these irrational thoughts that are going around in my head, which were there was no need for them because, as I mentioned before we started recording, my wife's a midwife, so she works a lot of shifts. So I am quite often the solo caregiver to them when she's on shift. So I was always there for my son. I was always did everything he wanted when she was breastfeeding. I would change nappies, when he was in the next to me. So I would get up in the night, I would take him out, change his nappy, and then give him to her for her to feed. I couldn't have done any more, but it still wasn't enough. I still wasn't going to be a good father to my daughter. And she was born. And I knew then that there was something not quite right with me. That something, not that I didn't bond with her, it was more of a fear that I was going to let her down, that I was going to fail her as a father, that I was going to fail my wife as a husband and my other children. So I believed with every ounce of my being that my wife would be better off if she had a different husband, and my children would be better off with a different father. So 6 weeks after my daughter was born, I phoned in sick to work. Took the kids to school. My wife had obviously thought I'd gone to work. Took kids, came back, dropped the car off, got the dog, walked down to the woods, let the dog off the lead, climbed a tree and put the dog lead around my neck, and I had 1 foot off the branch, ready to go. And the one thing that stopped me was my son. That morning, for no reason whatsoever, he woke up and I went through to him and he wrapped his arms around my neck like it felt like he never had before. Like he knew that there was something wrong. But he put his arms around my neck and just squeezed me as tight as he possibly could. And then he went back to sleep. So when I was stood on that branch, it wasn't I can't do this because I'm going to let everybody down and everybody's going to be so upset. It was, I can't go through with this knowing that I will never feel that love again. So I stepped down, phoned the healthcare professional I was talking to in the weeks leading up to it, and she told me to go to A&E. So my house was on the way past to the hospital. So I went home, dropped the dog off, went up to the bedroom where my wife and daughter were still asleep, told them what I'd done, didn't give her a chance to respond, and walked out of the house and went straight to A&E. And a few minutes after I'd left, apparently the police turned up at the door, searching for me. So yeah, it's
Wow, mate.
yeah,
Yeah, that's. But first of all, huge respect for sharing that. I'm just taking it in.
yeah,
Yeah, that's like, I mean, incredibly powerful. I mean, thank God you're sat here today
yeah,
for one, because I've spoken about it before. There's points in your life where things just hang on a knife edge, whether that's should have turned left, turned right,
yeah,
and it went wrong, or the opposite.
yeah,
It's so very very close. I mean, you you know you could have slipped. There's a million and one could haves,
yeah,
but they didn't, and you're here today, which is the
yeah,
important thing. But to get to that point, and I've spoken to a few people, and the fact that I've spoken to them says obviously everything you need to know.
yeah,
That's still here.
yeah,
But everyone I've spoken to that has reached that point that you nearly made has said the same thing, which is that they truly 100% believed that it was the best thing for the people that they loved.
yeah,
And I think one of the huge stigmas that needs to be dropped and left and not not spoken of is the selfish perspective to suicide, which is often referred to. It's a coward's way out. It's a selfish decision. How could they do that to everybody?
yeah.
But you've just echoed what everybody else I've spoke to has said, in that you truly believe that is the best thing for everybody.
Yeah.
It's not a selfish decision.
It's. I used to be one of those people many years ago who used to think that if somebody was to take their own life, it was a coward's way out. And I believed that so strongly. Like, how could you possibly do this to your family? And that's selfish. When I was stood up on that bench, on that tree, sorry, it's and it's it's difficult because I was there, and it's nobody ever speaks about this bit. And I've spoken to a few people who have been in my situation and have stepped down. Nobody prepares you for the feeling you feel when you're on that branch. It's everything was like, leading up to that moment, everything was too much. Everything was better off if I am not here. Leading up to that branch, there was a calmness which I have never felt in my life. A calmness of this is it. This is, I'm free. There's nothing else. And it's a calmness that I've never experienced before in my life. But it was such a, I am so unbelievably calm because I know that in my heart, this is the right thing to do. And looking back now, it's not a coward's way out. It's, to imagine how bad things must be to take that final step. I mean, I was nearly there, and thankfully, I'm not. I didn't go through with it. But to be in that moment and almost experience what this so many people actually go through with. Nobody talks about that calmness in that moment of. It's almost like a euphoric high of. There's been so much trauma, there's been so many things going on in your mind leading up to that one point, and you know in your heart that you're there. It's just like, there's nothing else after this. There's no fear of, I'm going to be feeling sad later, I'm going to be feeling pain later. It's just, that's the end. But that is it. It is the end. And that's what people, and I get that feeling as it was a euphoric high, but there is nothing after that. Coming down and being able to experience my son's first day in school, being able to experience my daughter's first steps, being able to experience them both telling me that they love me. There is no experience in the world that can match that one moment of being with your children and saying, Daddy, I love you, or Dad, I'm putting your arms around your neck and giving you the biggest squeeze in the world. Doesn't matter what euphoric high that was. Nothing will give you the sense of being with those people that you love. And it's always saying, they're better off without me, and I don't want to be here. But what people don't realize is what they have right in front of them. And it's what I definitely didn't realize. I didn't realize how supportive my wife was. I mean, she had no idea what was going on until the moment I went and told her. But everything afterwards has changed. Some good, some not so good. But there's nothing after suicide. And that's what people need to start looking at is, yes, it's such a awful condition to have depression, and being in that point where you think that there is no other way out than suicide. But there always is.
It's a permanent,
finding that little bit.
It's a permanent solution to a temporary state of mind, isn't it? However, you everything that you've said there, mate, is spot on. And it's spoken from your true lived experience. I can't offer my thoughts on it because I haven't been there. I've not been at that point, thankfully, myself. So that's why I just left you to say what you needed to say there. But I think it's worth pointing out that to people that are in that position, that the power of the mind and the control that our minds have over us, in that, whatever you believe, if you truly believe it, that's your reality. You could believe, if you truly 100% believe that the sky was red, then that would be your reality. So if your thought process and thought pattern is that everyone's better off without you, that's your reality. And that's the best way I think that I can sort of explain it when people argue that it's a selfish decision. It's not. If that person truly believes what they believe, then that is their reality. As much as nobody else might agree with that reality, to the person that lives in it, that's all there is. And it does take, and this is one of the key things about talking, you said your wife didn't know. I mean, looking back at that period and the build up to that period, with the knowledge that you now have,
Yeah.
if you could have done anything differently in that 6 weeks, 8 weeks to 12 weeks, or even
Yeah.
when you first got told about your wife being pregnant,
Yeah.
if there's anything different that you could have done, what would you have done?
I'd have spoken to somebody,
Mm.
mainly my wife, because I did exactly what we were talking about earlier on. I believed that I needed to be strong, and I believed that me expressing my concerns and expressing how I felt wasn't providing my wife with the support that she needed during pregnancy. She needed me to be this big, strong, roughy, tufty rugby player who has no emotions but is there to protect her.
Mm.
It nearly cost her everything. Me being that naive to think that she doesn't want to know how I feel. All she needs is for me to be here and to be strong. That was all in me. That was all what I'd worked up in my head, that it's not what she needed. And we've spoken about it since. We've
Mm.
spoken about, the me feeling like I was less of a man because I discussed my emotions. And she's openly said, no, actually, I think you're less of a man for keeping them in.
Yeah.
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 And it's at that point you think, shit, yeah, maybe you've got a point here.
Absolutely, I agree with that.
Yeah.
And it's a powerful statement. And I think part of the problem, if we examine why, we're told our values, and we're not only are we told our values, we're told other people's values.
Yeah.
So, like us as men, when we're raised, and certainly from a particular generation, we're from a very similar generation.
Yeah.
We are told what women want. For example, women want a big, strong man.
Yeah.
Who's asking the women? You know,
Yeah.
who's asking your wife, the ladies in your life? You know, would
Yeah.
would you rather me bottle all my emotions up, or would you rather me talk to you? And so you actually know what's going on in between my ears.
Yeah.
And you know what they'd all say, like now.
Yeah.
But again, us men think we know. I mean, it's one of those great sort of like, it's a great sort of contradiction in itself, because most men will openly admit we've got no idea what women think,
Yeah.
and that we don't understand them.
Yeah.
Yet at the same time, we'll all preach that we know what they want. Like, they're weird,
Yeah.
really. Like, women want a big, strong man, but I
Yeah.
don't understand women. I ain't got a clue what's going on in their
Yeah.
mind. It's like, well, how can we profess to know
Yeah.
that that's what they want then? If we openly admit we don't know what they want, on another hand.
Yeah.
But all too often, it's what we're told by
Yeah.
our peers, our parents, our friendship circles, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And that thing, whatever it is, that judgment, that's what needs to change, you know.
Yeah.
And I think, hopefully, and again, it's a massive credit to you, massive credit to the previous guests that have come on and had such open conversations. The power of this is that there will be people that are listening that will hear you talking about that period of your life and know that it's okay to talk,
Definitely.
you know.
And I think that is the one message I'm trying to push with these groups that I'm doing is nobody wants you to suffer in silence. We're all here and we're all going through similar things. I mean, we're
Yeah.
all, especially the groups I run, they are focused on people, men struggling with mental health. So we're all there. We all have a common thing that we have together. And it's people think that as men we don't want to talk. It's absolute bullshit. It's just that we feel like we've been conditioned and not given the opportunity to talk.
Yeah.
So it's groups like this, and what you're doing. It gives us that platform to say, actually, no, I want to talk. I want to be heard, and this is what is going on. And just please, somebody listen to me. But I think
That word there, mate, that you use, conditioned.
Yeah.
That's spot on. It's what I was searching for before. We have been conditioned.
Yeah.
And it's realizing that we need to reset that.
Yeah.
And start again. And the really fortunate thing, you said that you've got a son, I've got a son. The fortunate thing is, by recognizing the deficiency in this way of thinking, is that, you have now become self-aware, but I'm sure you will then pass that on to your son.
Definitely.
And hopefully, by having these conversations and the self-awareness and reflectiveness, you know, we can't turn back the time and help ourselves,
Yeah.
previous versions of ourselves,
Yeah.
but we can help the generations of the future,
Yeah.
our social circles, our friendship circles. And it's one of the things that I like to point out is that it's nobody's responsibility to fix anybody.
No.
However, we do have a responsibility to each other, particularly men, I feel, to provide that safe space to listen and
Yeah.
let people know that it's okay to talk.
Yeah.
And these whole messages, that's where our responsibility lies. Stop the ignorance. Stop, let's give it some focus. It's something that is taking the lives of more men than anything else in this country.
Yeah.
And it's the bizarre situation is because it is suicide, we aren't talking about it.
Yeah.
If it was anything else, if it was a particular cancer, if it was testicular cancer that was
Yeah.
killing more men under 50 than anything else in the country, we would all be going, Alan, you felt your balls recently, mate.
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah.
let's
Yeah.
and you'd have that conversation in a pub.
Yeah.
But the weird thing is, we won't have a conversation and talk about how we're feeling.
I know I don't know about you, but I feel almost empowered that the generation before me, it was, no, we are men. We don't talk about our feelings. That's for the women who are at home cooking and cleaning, and they're there to look after me, and they're there to look after the kids. We don't live in that 1960s world anymore. We've evolved from that. So I feel like I'm now in the generation where I can pass that on to my little ones,
Yeah.
so that they don't have to have that fear of,
Yeah.
can I talk about my feelings? My 2-year-old at home, she reads we read a book to both of them every night. We read 2 books and both every night. And one of their favourite books is a Colour Monster. And the Colour Monster goes on about different feelings and different emotions and colours associated with them.
Okay.
At 2 years old, my daughter is able to tell me that she is angry or she is upset or she is happy. Most of the time, she is angry because I'm not giving her a G-string or a bit of chocolate. But it's being able to give that to the next generation, being able to give them the tools to say, right, okay, I am angry. It may be something completely irrational, but I am able to express that I am angry and this is why, rather than
I
I
hope
don't talk
so.
about it.
Yeah. I mean, I look at my own circle, as it were, and my son, who's 17, he's so much more emotionally aware than me.
Yeah.
At that age, I
Yeah.
was completely shut off. And he's a popular lad. He's outgoing. He likes football.
Yeah.
He's a popular kid. But he's very much more. He's emotionally aware.
Yeah.
He is emotionally aware. Had 10 times whatever I was.
Yeah.
And that hopefully is what I can pass on to him. I think personally, the biggest problem generation is ours. Maybe from people who are currently, as we record now, probably 30 up to 60.
Yeah.
Like the generation that grew up in our time.
Yeah.
There's a weird sort of I guess, loss of belonging, purpose, identity, maybe, where the traditional male stereotype is kind of outdated.
Yeah.
And sort of ostracized in society now as well. I'm a bit of a contradiction in things because I also believe that, if you're living a life in accordance with your values I believe being masculine is positive.
Yeah.
And I think there's certain things as men that we enjoy doing
Yeah.
that, makes us, which is just part of being a man, part of our biology. We enjoy going and getting dirty and lifting heavy objects and, sort of like physical competition. I think that's in our nature, and I embrace that. But again, it's that separation between physical attributes and ability and emotions.
Yeah.
And it's that separation to go, no, do you know what? On an emotional level, we can still talk.
Yeah.
But again, that's a generational thing.
Definitely. I completely agree with what you're saying. If you look at a lot of these groups that they have for children, and you have the baby groups, and almost every one of them is 99% female.
Yeah.
all these aqua yoga, the yoga, they're all tailored for women.
Mm.
Why don't we have these groups for men?
Mm.
Which is, but men don't want to be sat in a room holding hands,
Yeah.
singing and dancing. That's not what a man wants to do. A man wants to be out in the
Yeah.
woods doing den building.
Yeah. Yeah.
So why don't we? Like, this is what I'm trying to
Which
do at
is
the
great
moment.
what you're doing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's why don't we have more activities like this that are
Mm.
tailored for men as well, or for families
Yeah.
rather than just the women? Because I've gone to
Yeah.
these groups. When my son was born, I had no shame. I would go to all these groups, and I didn't care what anybody thought about me. I was there for my son, but I was always sort of left by myself on the mat
Mm.
while all the women were over in the corner having a chat and a catch up. And nobody once came up to me and asked me, "Oh, do you want to come and meet
Mm.
everybody? Do you want to have a chat?" And it was like, "What's he doing here? He's making us all feel uncomfortable. There's a man here,
Mm.
or must be out babysitting." And it's just, let's get away from that and just be more inclusive and do things that
Yeah.
so mum and dad can join in on.
Again, though, mate, credit to you. You've seen the gap and you're doing something.
Yeah,
And all credit, mate. That is what the world needs. That's what today's day and age and our generation needs.
yeah,
Is people like you that's going to grab it by the reins and go, I see there's an issue. Here's a solution, and opening those doors.
yeah.
I'm going to pull it a little bit back. I don't mean to
No,
jump
no, it's
back
fine.
into the darkness,
Yeah,
but I think there's a few important sides to cover
yeah.
that could potentially help people. There's a couple of angles. First of all, I'd like to ask you about how your wife took the news that you had been that way, and then how that played out in the immediate aftermath.
It, like I said, I never gave her the chance to respond when I came
Mm.
home and I told her what I'd done. She was sort of still half asleep, and I walked in the door, told her what done, closed door, walked out, didn't give her a chance to get dressed and follow me. It was
Yeah.
just, this is what done, I'm going to the hospital. Um,
She had got no inclination up till that point.
she knew that I'd been upset. She knew that I'd sort of not quite been myself, but she just thought I was just tired.
Mm.
You got a 6-week-old baby who
Yeah, yeah.
needs feeding 3 times a night. It's understandable that you'd maybe mistake it for just being tired, and because I made
Mm.
a point of not showing that I was emotional or in any way what I was feeling. Um, so yeah, she had no idea, and I said earlier that it's had a lot of effect, whether some good, some bad. The good side is we talk about everything. There's nothing off limits anymore. Um,
Love that.
yeah,
Mm.
if I'm upset because I'm quite sensitive anyway.
Mm.
So if I've got a paper cut, she knows about it.
Mm.
That kind of thing. Just we're that open now. It doesn't matter. Even toilet habits. It's
Mm.
we talk about everything. Maybe we shouldn't do, but the downside is there are times where I've gone for a walk in the evening by myself with a dog,
Mm.
and I've got home and she's been worrying where I've been
Yeah,
because the mind automatically goes back to, is he okay? Is he here?
yeah,
Is he there? Um, Especially really early on, it was it almost felt like I had to keep checking in, not necessarily because she'd asked
yeah.
me to, but because I felt like I needed to let her know where I was so that she didn't worry.
Well, I guess the truth of the situation is that would have been very traumatic for her.
Yeah,
So that will be a trauma that sits within her that will
yeah,
probably fade over time. But I mean, we're still, still relatively recent
it is. Yeah,
in terms of traumas.
yeah,
Um, so I guess it's kind of quite natural that she
yeah.
would, but also I guess a point of pain for you that you can maybe see that on her face when you come in,
It
that there's been
is.
the worry.
Yeah, it is difficult because there are times now where if I've gone for a walk somewhere and there's not been phone signal, and
Mm.
I know that if we've had a tiff or anything like that, and then she's worried that maybe I've gone off and done something like that,
Yeah.
and it doesn't matter how many times you try and reassure that person, it's always back of your mind. Then he has done this, before, which it's not. I think that's just human nature, and
Yeah.
it's a consequence I've got to live with, because it's something I inflicted on my family, and am I ashamed of what I did? Yeah, of course I am. I am ashamed that I tried to go off and take my own life rather than talking to my family, talking to
Yeah.
my wife, talking to anybody about what was going on. Yeah, I am ashamed of it. But I think the biggest thing I regret is the pain that I've caused my wife and my immediate family, and it just goes to show, these little things that I used to take for granted. I used to be able to go out and, before having kids, I had to go out and not have a care in the world. I'd text her every now and again, and it's going to be fine. But now I feel like I need to let people know where I am.
Yeah.
So it has changed my
But
life in
in
that
a way,
way.
that's you looking after them.
Yeah.
No? There's a point I'd like to make to you, but also to anyone else that's listening. It's a common thing that when people reflect upon things that happened in the past, their behaviours in the past, that they use the word that you used: ashamed,
Yeah.
guilt, regret,
Yeah.
all common words. What I like to say to that, and it's something I've applied to myself when I look back at some of my previous behaviour and actions in life, is that you at that time in your life
Yeah.
were coping with your situation in the only way you knew how,
Yeah.
and that you didn't have the coping mechanisms that you now have,
Yeah.
the knowledge that you now have, and what I like to refer to as the mental tool set
Yeah.
that you now have.
Yeah.
So you didn't have it before, you
No,
know.
definitely not.
So the part of being ashamed, you just did not have the tools to deal with the situation you were in.
Yeah.
It's like, turning around and having a car with a flat tire, but you've got no tools to fix it.
Yeah.
You can't blame yourself for not fixing that flat tire.
Yeah.
And it might be in that situation you kicked it and walked off.
Yeah.
Now, later in life, you've learned how to change the tire. You've
Yeah.
got the tools to change the tire.
Yeah.
And that's what you're doing now.
Yeah.
So I think a big part of moving forwards is forgiving yourself. I mean, truly
Yeah.
forgiving yourself,
Yeah.
and realizing that that version of you didn't have the tools, couldn't have acted differently.
Yeah.
Because the great thing with perspective, isn't it? We look back and we go, I should have done this. I should have done, if only I'd have talked.
Yeah.
But that's you now.
Hindsight.
That's
Yeah.
you now.
Yeah.
So yes, you now know that. And maybe you can criticize yourself if you end up in the same situation and you don't talk, knowing what you now know.
Yeah.
But you then didn't know.
No. No.
So I think it's really important to reflect on it, but forgive that version of you for behaving the way that you did.
I agree. I mean, there are, like I said, am I ashamed of what I did? I am. However, if I hadn't have done what I did, I wouldn't be in the position. I'm not saying it was a good thing at all in any sense of imagination, but I've now taken such a horrific and traumatic thing that has happened in my life and flipped that.
Yeah.
I'm trying to change it into a positive to help other people, to prevent them from doing the same thing. So yeah, I regret my decision to go off that day and do it, but I am thankful that I am still here and able to use that negative part of my life, the part that was so awful and so traumatic to everybody involved, as a positive to try and support others now.
100%, mate. And, it's not endorsing getting to that stage.
No.
However, when you look at it from a different angle, it now shows you that actually reaching that point, that knife edge that you were on, has now forced you to address it head on, forced you to communicate it to the people around you. And now you're in a position where you've taken all that trauma, and the expression I love being post traumatic growth has given you that.
Yeah.
So you've taken your trauma, you're now turning that into something positive
Yeah.
and trying to help other people and other fathers that might be in a similar position,
Yeah.
which it's not good that you were there. But
No.
on the other side of it, you getting to the point where you considered and nearly went through with taking your own life could potentially stop in the future, who knows, limitless
Exactly.
amounts of people from getting to that same position.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a stoic reflection on life.
Yeah.
But the whole there's a Ryan Holiday book called The Obstacle Is the Way. Don't know if you're aware of it or read
No.
it. Read it; it's a great book.
Okay.
But essentially, this title sums it up. The obstacle is the way, and it's looking at things in life that are perceived to be bad and pulling the positives from it.
Yeah.
Like my car had a flat tire this morning. Well, at least I got to walk.
Yeah.
I got a walk in that I wouldn't have had.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's that sort of thing. And I mean, we're talking extremes, mate.
Yeah.
You nearly took your own life.
Yeah.
So to pull a positive out of that seems a little bit flippant. I don't mean it that way.
No, but
But
it has though.
mm,
It was such a negative, but I have been able to pull a positive out of it
yeah.
to change my life around, because now I feel like I've got purpose in my life. I feel like I
Mm,
now know what I want to do with my life. I mean, how often do you hear that you see these 40-year-olds who still don't know what they want to do with their life? So yeah,
never
so
in,
now
mate.
at the age of
Yeah.
I'm 38, not far off 39, and I feel like this is the point in my life now where I've got a direction. I know what I want to achieve. I know what purpose I have in life.
Yeah.
So that's the positive I've taken out of this.
Purpose is
Yeah,
so important, mate. It
definitely.
carries such a value that I don't think we really put enough value on.
Yeah,
The other thing before we move on, because again, I think there's a little bit of a stigma or a sticking point for some people speaking out is the fear of what happens when you do.
yeah,
So to pull back to your experience and that moment after you had taken yourself to, was it to A&E?
yeah.
What happened? What was the situation from there?
Um, it's a bit of a weird one. I arrived on the way to A&E. I phoned my best mate and told him what happened. Not in a I want you to come here and hold my hand and be with me sort of way, but it was I've done this. Sophie's at home with my children,
Mm,
with my youngest. My eldest is in school. Can you please go and pick him up after school and take him home? Just because I don't want her to have to deal with that on top of everything else. And that's all the conversation I had with him.
mm,
So I walked to A&E. As soon as I got to the A&E doors, there was two police officers waiting for me, and they didn't, not in
mm,
in a bad way, but they just wanted to make sure that I'd got there and I hadn't gone off and
mm,
tried to do it again. And within 20 minutes, my friend lives. His work is quite far away from A&E, but within 20 minutes. As I was talking to the police officers, he arrived at A&E and he was there with me, and he stayed in A&E with me. So I went in, told the receptionist, well, the police came in with me and told the receptionist, because this was
mm,
in the middle of COVID as well. So he was allowed to come in with me and sit down, and nurse came through, mental health nurse came through, took me through
mm,
into a different room, at which point Sophie arrived. And we just we spoke for a few hours. There was never a discussion of like he's a flight risk, we're going to section him or anything like that. It
mm,
was they understood how important it was for me to be home with my family. So yeah, they spoke to me, made sure that I was in a safe mental state,
mm,
and sent me home with my wife. And later on that day, the home treatment team arrived, and they took over for the week. Then they came once a day just to for the first week, just to make sure that I was okay and I wasn't at risk of doing anything again.
Okay, it's just interesting to hear the process, mate,
Yeah,
because I think maybe some, uh, from a perspective of maybe somebody's listening that is struggling
yeah,
and would be hesitant to reach out in case of that. Well, if I tell people I'm having these thoughts, am I going to get carted away and
yeah,
sectioned?
yeah.
So it's interesting to
No,
hear what happened. I mean,
yeah,
I'm sure maybe some people do get sectioned for their own safety,
yeah,
but I think it's important to talk about those things because I
yeah,
see it from a perspective of the questions that other people might want to ask.
yeah,
And that's the questions that I try and ask are very much from a, if I was listening to this,
yeah, yeah,
what would I be thinking?
yeah,
And that's it. Like, well, what happened then?
yeah.
You know?
No, to be fair, the police officers, at no point did I feel like I was going to be
Mm,
banging back of the police car with handcuffs on
yeah,
and taken off. That was never their their goal. Their
yeah,
goal was just to make sure that I'd got to
yeah.
hospital safely without going off and endangering myself or others.
Mm.
And to be fair, they were really nice and chatty and
I'm glad to
really
hear that.
helpful.
Yeah, I'm glad to
And
hear that.
even A&E, it was obviously I spoke to the receptionist and then you go into the waiting area. I don't think I was there for longer than 2 minutes before
Mm,
somebody'd come through and took me to another room to obviously away from everybody,
yeah.
um, so I could have that sort of one to one and be able to speak freely rather than thinking the
Mm,
police have just walked me into the A&E. What's he done? So no, it was all done really caringly.
that's
I
good.
guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even the home treatment, it was they didn't set times and right we're going to come this time and you need to be home. It wasn't didn't feel like I was on tag
Yeah.
or anything like that. It
Yeah.
was like you tell us when you're home what time suits you best with bedtimes and meal times and we'll work around that and we'll come whenever suits
Mm.
you.
Well, I guess, Ali, before we move on, because I'm going to pick it a bit more positive and we'll talk about what you're now doing
Yeah,
and what you're trying to set up, which is great. Before we do that, if there's anyone listening that is feeling in a dark spot
yeah,
and is having, speak openly, if there's anyone listening that is having suicidal thoughts, thinking about ending their own life, thinking that people would be better if they weren't around,
yeah.
as somebody that's been there, what advice would you give anyone listening who is in that position?
I think the biggest thing that I've found is when people take their own lives, it is an impulsive thing, and it
Mm,
was the same with me. It wasn't a planned thing that I need to go. I need to book the day off, and I need to go to here this day and that day, and this is the tree I'm going to hang myself off. It wasn't any of that. It was that morning. That is the plan I've made there and then. I'm going
yeah.
to go. So a lot of the time, it is impulse. So if anybody is listening, please just take 5 minutes, go off and talk to somebody about it.
Mm,
And I can guarantee you, even if you got a plan of right, I want to go, I'm done, I'm out, I've had enough, I need to go and do this, and you've instantly made a plan. All right, I'm going to go to the woods, I'm going to hang myself from a tree, or I'm going to do whatever. Wait 5 minutes because most of the time that impulse after 5 minutes will dissipate.
mm,
Go off, make yourself a cup of tea, cup of coffee, have your cup of coffee. That just that 5 minutes or 10 minutes of
mm,
doing that process of boiling the kettle, filling the kettle,
yeah.
boiling the kettle, making yourself a cup of tea or coffee, is already taking your mind off the want
Mm.
to not be here.
And let's be honest, there's no rush
No, there isn't.
because if you're making that
Yeah,
decision, it's a permanent one.
yeah,
There's no rush to get there.
yeah,
So you can afford 5, 10 minutes,
yeah,
15 minutes
yeah,
to speak. I mean, I'll jump in and put this in there now because of obviously the volunteer work that I do.
yeah,
Samaritans, mate, fantastic facility. if you want to talk to somebody who's completely impartial, doesn't know you, completely anonymous, your details and do not come up, nobody knows who you are, you can call Samaritans on 116 123 24 hours a day, 365 days a week, and just talk to somebody, and just let them know how you're feeling. And having been on the phones myself and taken those calls,
Yeah.
I know the power of that and the difference. And
Yeah.
what you're saying there about the impulse
Yeah.
is what we are sort of like trained and taught. And
Yeah.
we're sort of told that it's normally a 15-minute window,
Yeah.
essentially. If you can talk to somebody for 15 minutes that is at that point,
Yeah.
a lot of the time they will sort of think again about their course of action.
Yeah. I mean, I've gone through a number of different therapies now, and they talk about the rational and the irrational mind.
Mm,
In that impulse moment, you're not thinking with your rational mind, you think with your irrational mind.
mm,
Give yourself that 15 minutes just to have a cup of tea or coffee
yeah.
and bring your rational mind back in and then speak to somebody.
Mm,
Ideally, you want to speak to somebody straight away. If you are thinking of going off, you've made active plans to do something, phone 999.
mm,
But yeah, it's like you said, most of the time it's that impulsive, I need to get out now. Just 15 minutes, it's suicide forever.
yeah.
So take out 15 minutes, have you even, just have yourself a cup of tea or coffee. And
Mm,
that could save your life.
incredible, really, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's such a profound moment, and you've referred to all the moments that you've had since that you would never have had,
yeah,
and that's yeah, it's really really powerful stuff. I keep repeating that word, but that's what keeps coming to mind, so I keep saying it. But it is, mate. I really appreciate your openness, mate. You're giving me a lot of food for thought, and that's why I'm sort of pausing a bit here because
yeah,
I'm processing everything that you're telling me in real time.
yeah.
But yeah, really appreciate you opening up on it all, mate. I really
You too.
feel that these conversations will help people, and
Yeah,
getting into the nitty gritty of how you felt, how you coped, what you would have done differently. I think that is what needs to be out there,
yeah.
So I really appreciate that, mate. And on
You too.
that note, we will then move into what you're doing now.
Yeah. Okay.
So, how did that come about?
So I after the suicide, I had that epiphany moment of right. I want to go and help other people from doing this themselves. So how can I help other fathers? How can I help how can I help anybody from being in that situation? So I applied for a few jobs, working with the council, the local NHS, and because I've got no training in mental health,
Mm,
or I had no training at the time in mental health, I was laughed out the door. Even though I had the passion and I want the desire to better myself, to go to college and do anything I could to help, it was still no. You've got no training, and we're not going to help you. We're not going to give you the experience because you've got no training. And yeah, so it was just the doors were slammed in my face a few times. And then I applied for one with the local council, and they said apply. And one thing or another, I didn't get it. But they'd passed my details over to an organisation. Um, it's called Taith Saith. It's a Welsh word.
mm,
It's Journey to Seven, so from 0 to 7 years old.
okay.
And they contacted me and told me the work they're doing. And I went for a meeting thinking, this is going to be another one of them cases where I'm just laughed out the door because I've got no experience. So I went there and they were fantastic. There was two ladies I spoke to, and they were looking at recruiting more men to help run these groups, these children groups. So through them, I became a father champion. within Anglesey, just supporting fathers. And they introduced me to Mark Williams, and it was almost like an epiphany moment when I started talking to him.
Mark's great. Like the energy he carries and the
Yeah.
passion for what he's doing
Yeah,
just connects.
it does. Yeah,
You know, I had a great conversation with Mark. Got a lot of time. Hi, Mark. But yeah, it's people like him that will make a difference and that are needed. So yeah.
So I knew that I wanted to help fathers, but I had no idea how to go around it. So a few conversations with him. Obviously, he's down South Wales. I'm North, so we had a few Zoom meetings and on the phone a few times. And I think towards the end, I was badgering him every day about what do I do next. But I knew that this man was somebody I needed to sort of keep around me and who was going to help guide me into how best to support fathers. And he has. Without his support, I would never have dreamt of starting up my own social enterprise of House Dad, Summer Dad. And he's been mentoring me ever since. And he's, like I said, he's just an amazing man, and he's done so much for fathers' mental health.
Absolutely.
We're running a petition at the moment together to get more support from the Welsh Government for fathers' mental health in Wales.
Yeah, again, through his own lived experience.
Yeah.
And I think there's such power to that.
Yeah.
You know, there really is. And there's nobody better to understand somebody that's in that position than somebody that's been there.
Yeah.
Which is why it's so powerful. So yeah, it's fantastic, mate. And so would you call it a movement, House Dad? How would you refer to House Dad?
I refer to it as just a group for dads to come along and just have a laugh, spend time with the kids, and bond with the children, because that's what I've found is dads don't have the opportunities, or don't have majority of fathers, they get the 2 weeks off right at the beginning, and then they're back to the normal 8 till 5 Monday to Friday. So they get the 2 days off a week to spend with the kids, which isn't enough to create that valuable bond. So this is about giving dads the opportunity for just to be dad and child, to go out and do things together without mum, without anybody else. And through that, build dad's mental health, which then only helps the child's growth in the future and being able to be more emotionally aware of their own feelings if you see dad talking about it.
That's beautiful, mate. So it's like a dad's group to echo the mother's group, the plethora of mothers groups that are out there that, quite rightly, that there aren't the fathers groups.
Yeah.
Actually, at this point, I'd shout out to David. I was on a podcast myself last week. The podcast is called Diary of a Dad EO. So David, who has started that, is doing a similar thing with like dads groups and supporting dads in a slightly different way, I guess. Okay. But his podcast is based on that the difficulty of sort of transforming from a CEO to being a dad, and then the guilt, the battles, the way up between being there for the baby and running a business. And so he's addressing that. And I went on his podcast and talked to him about my experiences of being a parent, and similar but very different to what you're doing, similar sort of vein. But again, mate, it really needs focus and attention.
There's such a need for it. It's not just I'm setting up, I don't want anybody else to. I want us all to work together so that we, the common reason of dads aren't supported. If we all work together, maybe we can make a difference.
Yeah, and I think this is the thing, isn't there? I mean, making waves at governmental levels is very difficult and long.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like the plans you got to put in place to create change. You've got to have like a 10-year plan.
Yeah.
What you're doing is so much more direct, and
Yeah.
that responsibility as yourself, as a parent, to set up those groups amongst other fathers. And the great thing with that, and I love what you're doing. Like I'm a big advocate for the whole walking and talking
Yeah.
kind of groups and that kind of thing. I think it's great for the mind.
Yeah.
It's really good for your mental health to be out in nature,
Yeah.
physical exercise. It's easier to talk to people when you're out walking.
It is. Yeah.
But you're setting the group up. But I would imagine everybody within that group who's attending, you're all helping each other.
Exactly. It's not. They don't all come and
To you, to
and
Aled,
sit in a
to
circle, and I'm there dictating to everybody. Right, you should be doing this. You should be doing that.
yeah,
Because I got my own issues as well.
of course. So you find your
So
own
yeah,
therapy and support within
exactly.
it.
Yeah. So we're all
Yeah,
a close group where we're there to support each other. Everyone in the group is their experience is as valuable as the next. Whether it's mine, whether it's theirs, or it's anybody's. We all bounce off each other and give each other that emotional support that we all need.
it's brilliant, mate. I love it. I think it's a great idea. I wish you all the success in the world with it. I think
Thank you.
you carry on. Um, all your social channels, mate. I mean, actually, we'll say that now. Where can people find you? For one,
I'm on Facebook, which is How's Dad, Sit My Dad, and I'm also on Instagram, which is again Sit My Dad, How's Dad.
okay.
I have got a TikTok, which is my own personal one, which is Aled Vaughan. And I am in the process of building a website.
Okay,
Yeah,
brilliant. I'll put your links, your social media links on the episode description as I do with all my guests. So
thank you.
people after listening to this that want to go and follow you, and I'll obviously when I put the clips out and whatnot, I'll tag and share your socials then. So
Yeah,
hopefully
brilliant.
direct a few people in your favour.
Yeah, thank you.
Just information wise on what you're doing, is that just specific at the moment to your local area?
At the moment, it's Anglesey and Gwynedd, just because I work full time
Yeah,
myself.
of course.
So
Yeah.
this is all done after hours and on weekends where I've got the time to.
Yeah.
I sort of use it as I'm taking my kids out for a walk,
Yeah.
and if dads want to come
Brilliant,
with me
yeah.
and have a chat, then I'm all for it. If they
There's,
don't,
yeah,
I'm out with my kids.
there's so much potential for it, Alan. I mean, are you aware? There's a few organisations. There's one, and I only know of it because I've got a group that actually walk around my local town
Yeah.
called I think it's Men Who Walk and Talk. Possibly might be
Okay.
butchering that.
Yeah.
And there's things like Andy's Man Club and
Yeah.
things like that, and it all started off with one.
Yeah.
So there's no reason that in the future How's Dad can't be a national, or even if it's just Wales or a UK thing, where you might be able to hold training sessions and appoint other walk leaders, and then have How's Dad, walking groups or social groups across the country. There's so much room for growth, and it really is needed.
There is, yeah, and exactly like I said, there's so much need for it. It's not just Anglesey and Gwynedd or just Wales. It is, it's a global problem, not just in the UK. It's all over the world, and the way I tell it, the way I explain it to everybody is, if I change one father's life so that he stays around, doesn't commit suicide, and he's there to support his family, then I know that I can leave this world in a better state than I left it. So I don't look at how big can I make this company, can I make it nationally, can I make it globally. All I'm interested in is, can I save one father from committing suicide? And
You'll do that, mate. You'll do that, and
I think that's what we all want, isn't it?
You'll do it, and you'll probably do it with two things: without you knowing, and without the other person knowing.
Yeah.
Because the likelihood of somebody actually coming, it might happen, somebody coming to you and saying, "Aled, I was considering it, but now I'm not because of the support I've gained from the group," is one thing. But the other thing that will happen is that people will get the support from your organisation and groups
Yeah.
and never reach that stage
Yeah.
because of the support. So they won't be in a position to turn around to you and say, I was considering doing that, because
Yeah.
potentially your support will stop that from ever happening. And
Yeah.
in a way, that's a far better thing.
Definitely. Yeah.
But again, I think, the overarching message is that as dads, as men, we do need support.
Yeah.
We do have our own demons. All of us have different demons,
Yeah.
generally from our, the conditioning, to
Yeah.
mention what you said earlier, and we all are conditioned differently.
Yeah.
Our family environments, our childhood experiences, they all shape who we become.
Yeah.
And we all have our different traumas that we deal with. But realizing that it's not a weakness. I'm trying to sort of summarize the conversation here, but to realize it's not a weakness, to realize that we all need support, and
Yeah.
that you can be a big, strong alpha male that is in tune with his emotions,
Yeah.
that gets sad sometimes, that
Yeah.
cries sometimes.
Yeah.
That's all fine.
Yeah.
There's no these pigeonholes that we put ourselves in. Let's face it, mate, they're bollocks.
They are.
So,
Really are. Yeah.
and all
Yeah.
too often we worry about the judge. It's all about judgment and
Yeah.
perception, and we worry about what people think about us.
Yeah.
9 times out of 10, nobody gives a shit. We're all too
Yeah.
busy worrying what everybody thinks about ourselves, and the reality is that everyone else is worrying about the same. Nobody's thinking, like, from me. Nobody's thinking about me.
No.
Nobody cares about what I'm doing or I look like,
Yeah.
because they're all worried about what they're doing and what they look
Yeah.
like, and
Yeah.
just can get on with your life and be the best version of yourself for the people you love.
It's funny you say that, because what I had mentioned is on the drive over, I'm still receiving counselling myself.
I think that's great, mate.
Yeah, I'm in
I
a
do.
much better
Yeah.
place than I was 3 years ago, but I still receive counselling once a week just to check in. And one of the things I spoke about was I used to feel, I can't. What I used to do was I'll tell people that this is what I did, and I'll tell this group that this is what I did, which is all true. Every one of the stories was true. But I would give them bits and them bits and them bits, and by the end of it, I was like, everything that I have done with my suicide attempt and everything that has happened previously, everybody knows it now. So why am I still ashamed of my past? Why am I still ashamed of this? Now, the conversation I was having with him on the drive over was, I don't care anymore, because everybody knows it, and nobody has pointed at me and said, "Oh God, look at you! Look at what you've done!" And everybody's been the complete opposite and been so supportive and so open to talk about it. And that's what I want people to realize is, you don't have to be ashamed of it. There is nothing to be ashamed of. We all have our demons. We all have our issues. And I can guarantee you that you talk to me about your demons, I'm not going to go off and think about, I can't believe he's thinking this. I can't believe he's doing that.
The
I've
perfect
got my own
life
demons,
doesn't. Yeah.
which to me are worse than yours.
The perfect life doesn't exist, mate, does it?
No.
That's the thing, and we often compare ourselves to perfection.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's everything that you said there, mate. It's spot on. It really is. Yeah, it's perfectly said. We fear judgment, and we create our own worst case scenario.
Yeah.
But all too often, I mean, I've witnessed it firsthand. I think I think you're about the 28th, 29th guest that's been on the podcast.
Yeah.
And the feedback. So out of all of it, touch wood, nobody has had any negative feedback.
No.
In fact, everybody has remarked that, in surprise, I've had so much support. I'm actually shocked that I've had so much support. And we often, we catastrophize. I think, again, it's partly human nature. But what I am seeing and feeling happen is that, due to the support people are getting for opening up, it's encouraging others to come forward, which was exactly why I started doing this.
Yeah.
And quite a few guests have come and they've sat and they've spoken, not necessarily to me about something they've not told anybody else, but they've certainly not publicly told other people.
Yeah.
And generally, I'll check in with a guest afterwards. How are you doing about the episode coming out? And so often I get told that it's like a weight lifted.
Yeah.
That it's freeing to tell the story. The support they receive is great. And often having your truth out there, it's like, well, I don't have to pretend anymore.
Yeah.
You can be authentically who you are,
Yeah.
without fear of judgment. And there's something so lifting about that.
Yeah.
Like,
It's I get that a lot where I've definitely done it myself, and I'm not sure about yourself. And the way I describe it to people is, it's like when you're in work and you've messed up, you've done something wrong. You've played it out in your head 1,000 different times about what your boss is going to say to you, maybe even more than 1,000 times. And how many of them versions or events have you gone through actually come true?
Yeah.
And it's never the one that you think is going to happen. You always catastrophize. You always think, oh, I'm going to get sacked over this, or I'm going to get some shitty comment. And it never happens.
No.
Because that's just what we do as humans, is we catastrophize things.
We're
exactly the same as this.
We're our own worst critic.
Yeah.
Normally. And I often think nobody can judge me more harshly than I judge myself.
Yeah.
So generally speaking, whatever, and it's been a journey I've been on myself. But I know that, and the only person at the same time, the only person that can punish me is me.
Yeah.
Because getting back to the power of the mind and my own reality, if I truly believe that I'm correct or wrong in anything, then that is my reality.
Yeah.
So I am my own worst critic, my own biggest judge, and the one that can make myself, I'm the only person that can make myself feel bad about anything.
Yeah.
You can take the external stimulus and people's opinions, but if you don't give it any weight or credit, then it literally means nothing.
Exactly.
So yeah, it's been a great conversation, mate. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, me too.
I think we've worked our way through to sort of like a natural conclusion, mate. I just want to wish you all the best with what you're doing. I think it's brilliant. I'll give you all the support I can from my platforms.
Thank you so much.
Before we wrap things up, is there anything that we haven't discussed that you wanted to talk about?
No, I don't think so. I think I just wanted to highlight the importance of just of reaching out. And like I just mentioned then, you've already gone through 1,000 different scenarios in your head of what this person's going to say. That is all in your head. It's just, you'll be surprised about the support and the love that you get that moment you do finally reach out and tell them exactly how you're feeling. I think people just need to have that confidence, maybe just have that cup of tea before you speak to anybody, and just start talking more. I think that's the message I want to leave with, is please just reach out. Let's not leave these children without the parents.
That's perfect, mate. Again, thank you very much. Thank you for your openness. Some really strong messages there that I'm sure will go on to help people. And to all of you still listening, thank you very much for tuning in to another episode. Please like, share, follow, subscribe on whatever platform you are listening on. I know it sounds a bit baggy, I hate asking, but it really does make a difference, because the more subscriptions the podcast gets, it means that the various platforms then show it to more people. And the messages that I'm getting and talking to various guests and the topics we're covering can only help if people listen. So it's a case of getting the podcast out to as many people as possible, just letting people know it's there. I like to think of it, the episodes, as like a bookcase. Here's an episode on this, that, and the other. It's there as a resource for people if they need to listen to it. The great thing with podcasts, they're eternal. So it can be picked up and listened to at any point. But we need people to know that the resource is there. So all I can ask you to do is give it a like, a share, a follow, a subscribe, and let people know that the podcast is there. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll catch you again soon.